So we have many solutions to solve the climate crisis and to stay within what they call planetary boundaries. There's no lack of innovation. We have so many things that we can implement in terms of these big challenges the world faces. But one challenge that perhaps hasn't been fully resolved is the body of knowledge, based on often brilliant but massive reports by the United Nations, say, or universities or research institutes, and so on. It's vast in terms of the last like 20 odd years of knowledge that's been accumulated. How do we navigate this knowledge? How do we bring this knowledge into action? And how do we actually tailor all this knowledge to the circumstances of a country or a city or a company indeed, so that they have a tailoring that suits their circumstances, both in the medium and short-term and long-term goals? Artificial intelligence is getting a lot of bad press at the moment, but could it have a silver lining in respect to taking the vast tome of knowledge that we have on sustainability and environment and climate change and taking those solutions and tailoring them more directly and swiftly to someone's goals, and in a way that is simple for a president or a prime minister or the CEO of a company to understand, with a menu of simple but straightforward and impactful answers that meets the Paris Climate Change Agreement's targets and keeps us within those planetary boundaries. We're going to invite three experts to discuss this. We have on Zoom Jennie-Marie Larson, the CEO and founder of something called Planetary Intelligence. We have Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, co-president of the Club of Rome and one of the leaders of this very impactful and very interesting and very useful, let's put it that way, report Earth for All. And we have Owen Gaffney. He's also co-author of Earth for All, which its full title is A Survival Guide for Humanity. And he's also the Chief Impact Officer at the Nobel Prize organization, as well as doing much science for things like the Potsdam Climate Impact Institute in Germany, or certainly has done in the past. Owen and Sandrine, we'd like to base this conversation at the opening on your project, The Earth for All, on how humanity as a whole can prosper within planetary boundaries. And I suppose we'd like to know a little bit from the Earth for All work. How is it going in terms of implementation, which is kind of what we're talking here? How do we get knowledge out, and then how do we get knowledge used? Who would like to go first, Owen or Sandrine?
Owen, you go first.
So thanks, Nick. So with the Earth for All, basically we brought together a group of leading economists from around the world and system dynamics modelers to look at two scenarios this century. The too little, too late scenario. So the scenario that we're implementing right now, where we are making some progress on some of the big issues facing humanity. We are, there are strong, climate agreements in many countries now for. And so where will that take us by the end of the century? Will that be enough to stay within planetary boundaries? Will that be enough to stabilize Earth? And will this give all people a high quality of life? And then the second scenario we were looking at is the giant leap scenario. What happens if in this next decade we make a huge investment in our future? And not just on terms of climate, but also in terms of nature, also in terms of poverty, in gender empowerment, in inequality, on our food systems. What would it take to do that? And what does that look like? So in terms of implementation, what does a real systemic solution look like in terms of policies, in terms of tax reforms, in terms of emissions reductions, in terms of pollution reduction, and empowering women and giving more people workers' rights, etc. So to create our implementation isn't just about a sort of technical fixes of reducing emissions. It's about actually strengthening democracies and improving our institutions so that there's a sense of solidarity in the world, in that we're all in this together and we all need to move together at speed. So what do we need to implement to have to get that movement, and that's foundational. That's what we've been looking at. But over to Sandrine for more.
Yeah.
Maybe to build on that great introduction, I think what's one of the key aha moments from the Earth for All initiative and the work that we did with economists, but also through our system dynamic model, was the interrelationship between social and environmental tipping points. And the fact that they're truly inextricable. And I think that the key there was our realization through this analysis that the speed and scale of actually reaching the planetary boundaries and staying within a safe operating space is directly linked to poverty and inequality. And this has enabled us to, through this initiative, start to work with countries and actual continents, regions, because we've actually also been commissioned by Secretary General Guterres to do further analysis for Africa and also for Latin America, to think through then, okay, so if we are going to maintain economic development and ensure that we bring more people out of poverty and inequality, we then can start to work with, in particular, small and medium-sized income countries in both anchoring a poverty alleviation and inequality aspect into their shift towards protecting the environment and ensuring that we actually have ambition on climate. And this has been a very important message that is anchored in knowledge. So we were talking about knowledge and science before, but also then very much in a new narrative that we have very much been working with, myself and Owen and the others, in the way in which we then communicate this, both at the international level and how that translates into new instruments and calls for change in terms of the financial architecture, moving beyond Bretton Woods, bringing in the Bridgetown Initiative, thinking through debt cancellation, through other wealth distribution and, for example, wealth taxation as a key tool in progressive taxation, but then also how we bring more people on the journey through citizen assemblies and translating that knowledge and that science into something that's meaningful for them. And that's also why, again, Nick, I'm here at this Wellbeing Economy Forum, because it's very relative to the types of thinking that some of the governments here have been thinking about in terms of how they translate the well-being economy as really the way in which we can move forward and anchor both these 5 key turnarounds that Owen has talked about that need to happen, this giant leap, and ensure that we stay within the planetary boundaries.
So if I was trying to play devil's advocate here, I have some personal experience of this. I worked for the UN Environment Programme for 13 years as communications director and released several of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, particularly in 2005. Some of UNEP's global environmental outlooks, many reports on coral reefs and great apes and ecosystem management and the green economy and how we can factor economics into looking after nature, and so many reports. And yet I'm not saying that people on the bus should be chatting about these reports and saying, what do we do? But I still feel somehow that all that volume of knowledge has informed reports afterwards, but hasn't really settled. I mean, for example, with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, you would think all the governments have signed up to those reports. They must be well ahead now in dealing with climate change. Why do you think that we're still, in a sense, blocked with the knowledge on one side, but the implementation on the other side? Is it just human nature, or is there some trick that we're missing?
Well, I think it's both. I think the trick we're missing is we've done a very bad job of translating that knowledge into why it's important for individuals. I had set up actually a communications analysis for the European Commission, bringing in Owen and others, and together we started to unpack the European Green Deal. And one of the big insights that we saw in looking at all of the material is that it didn't talk about the individual. It didn't talk about why the European Green Deal was good for me. And I think that is part of the problem. And this is what we need to work on at the broader scale. So yes, all of those reports are fundamental because we need the science and it's evolving incredibly fast. But we all need to get better at translating that into what it means for individuals, what it means for communities, what it means for particular policy parties, players, power mongers, etc. It needs to be translated in what this means for a variety of different types of actors.
Right.
And let me just say that the fact that we have not been good at this, and I will speak about this today in my presentation at this forum, is why we've had the European elections that we've had. The European elections have been an emotional election. They have not been a knowledge-based election. And we will see that in the US, we have the same with the Trump effect. We have to get better at translating this into the emotion, not into fear, but into hope, into giving people a sense that actually this is a journey that they can jump on, not with incredible sacrifices, some of course, but mostly with this is the biggest challenge we're facing, and this is the only way we can move together is by starting to implement and put in place some of the key solutions that we have before
Yeah.
us.
Let's just hold it there a second, because we've got Jennie-Marie Larson with us, the CEO and founder of Planetary Intelligence. Jenny, I think towards the end of this dialogue, you're going to give us a little demo of how this thing works. But just give us your take. Why did you feel that you needed to bring something like artificial intelligence into this discussion to translate knowledge into action? I think particularly in your case, focusing on companies. Tell us a little bit about the background of this. Tell us who's involved and what you're hoping to achieve.
Hi, Nick. Thank you so much. Yes, it was actually precisely as Sandrine just said, is many, many years ago, looking at all of the knowledge, all of the books, all of the reports, all of the science. And once you begin exploring, you realize nobody knows about this in the general population. And if you keep exploring, you realize there are so many solutions out there. And it was the discovery of Project Drawdown a number of years ago when we realized if we already know what all the problems are, and we already know what all the solutions are, has anybody identified where all the solutions need to go? In which combination, with which predicted impact? So it was all about trying to harness and bring together all of this intelligence that we in this community know is out there and are really familiar with, but it doesn't make it outside of this community necessarily. They are just subjected to the media, reports on disasters. There's no, here are the solutions. We know how to address this, and this is why it's going to make your life, your business, your city, your community a better place to exist. So that really is the origins of this. And it wasn't can we develop an AI platform to recommend solutions? It was, how do we democratize access to climate intelligence, access to all the solutions? How do we, with speed and scale, deploy these solutions? And AI is an interesting tool to derive actionable insights from masses of data. You know, how do we provide access to those insights? What are the paths to providing the signals through the noise?
But Jenny, in practical terms, I mean, for example, are you working with companies on this? Are you working with research institutes? How are you bringing all this knowledge of, it's decades of knowledge, right, on sustainability and climate and environment and things like, how are you bringing it in? And how is the plan about translating that into something very practical? I know you're going to give us a demo just towards the end, a demo of a particular sector of the economy that could benefit from this, but who's involved? Just give us a glimpse.
Well, 3 or 4 years ago, when we began the R&D phases, we really tried to figure out what was the 20% that we could focus on that would have the 80% impact. And doing the math on emissions, you can cut it in so many ways. But if you look at cities, that's 73% of emissions, and that's where people live and consume. and vote and interact and communicate. So we chose cities as the very first place to understand, what suites of solutions are working and where can those suites be repeated for predictable impact. So for example, the story of the city of Oslo. How did they get to net zero construction? What were the policies? What was the financial instrument used for that? How did they communicate to the community that enabled them to deploy this suite of solutions? And where else on the planet could that be repeated?
Hmm.
And there are a number of examples of well-meaning policies that have been deployed that have had negative impacts, but were intended indeed to have positive impacts. So as we started with cities and slowly but surely realized that that's a very challenging user to scale with, although cities are, thank goodness for all the great work of ICLEI and C40 and the Global Urban Development, GUD, cities are beginning to share and scale best practices.
Hmm.
And business, on the other hand, you could also cut the emissions. That's the majority of sources, but that's also where there isn't enough democratization of best practices.
Yeah.
So we've done a pathway of learning where can you address the largest impact with the smallest focus. So we've now moved into looking at business as a user and helped largely by finally the regulatory environment supporting that. So we're focused on supporting business transitions by sharing best practices and suites of solution in the transition.
Hmm.
But you can't divide the impact because we're all citizens.
Okay.
So we have scope of impact across cities, across business, across voting.
Okay, super. I mean, as I say, Sandrine, Owen, Jenny's going to give a little demo because we've got about 10 minutes left of this this session. But somehow, do you think AI, Sandrine, Owen, is a bit like a knife? You can butter your bread, but you can also cause quite a lot of harm in the wrong hands. I mean, is it one of those technologies that we're talking about in terms of translating knowledge, or yeah? What do you have a view on AI, Owen?
Yeah, well, so I published a paper earlier this year in Nature on one factor of AI that, we don't, given we know it's going to have a huge disruptive impact on the global economy. And there's, many predictions on the scale of its impact on GDP over the next 10, 15, 20 years. We don't know the emission scenarios. Is it going to be positive for emissions or negative for emissions? Is it going to, if you just take the data centers alone, there's a lot of media around the number of data centers we're going to need, and they're going to be more resource intensive, so higher emissions if they're not built sustainably. But beyond that, how's AI going to affect consumption and production in the world? How is AI going to affect societies and polarization in the world, and how will those two things affect policies on emissions trajectories, consumption towards more fossil fuels? Will AI be helping the oil companies extract more oil? Will AI be developing more products based on fossil fuels and getting and selling them and marketing them to more people?
Yeah, or can AI
or
can AI synthesize all the knowledge of the world and bring it to better use? I mean, that's another possibility, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the scientific advances that we can get from AI could have a massively disruptive effect on emissions. For genetics and food systems, for example, and carbon storage in the biosphere, to new materials, new batteries, all of these things. Although it's still not clear to me with the large language models, they're sucking up all the world's data. But as you started off talking about, Nick, the scientific research, 2 to 3 million papers are published every year. This is the most valuable, important body of knowledge we have as a species. It's not clear how much of that knowledge the large language models, beyond the abstracts of these papers, is using. And it would be really useful to have a better handle on that. But yeah, in some areas, I'm absolutely sure when it comes to, for example, wind and solar. A lot of the big challenges there are about scaling, about the processes we need to. It can be 10 years from first application for a wind farm to actual completion due to the amount of paperwork and bureaucracy. I think large language models can really condense that down to maybe cut that time in half.
Right, Sandrine, I'm gonna. It's just like a one-word response, and I'm gonna let you go because you have to go back to the meeting. We have to see Jenny's presentation. But do you have an opinion on this?
No, absolutely. I think we can't not have an opinion on this.
Yeah.
I mean, as Owen has indicated, AI for good, AI that actually does assist in us transitioning, ensuring that we have low carbon solutions, not actually create more of a problem. The ethical aspect of AI, let's not forget that I fundamentally believe these European elections were driven largely also by bots and by AI. There is so much data now that is showing the same effect that we had with Cambridge Analytica with regard to the Trump election as to what's happened with the European elections. So AI has to be transformed into a tool that is going to enable humanity to meet its challenges, not to become the ultimate challenge.
Right.
And I think that would be my last word.
Got you. Okay, Jenny, give us a glimpse into how this thing could work for a sector of the economy. Over to you.
Indeed. I just wanted to respond to AI for good ? It's very exciting to learn about the future innovations and future applications of AI. And indeed, we are seeing really important applications, such as in medical technology, identifying disease. This is very exciting, but it needs to have a job. It's meant to be a tool to support and solve problems for humanity. So this body of scientific research, which if you expand that to include books from thought leaders that we know and trust and believe in, the Earth for All book, Planetary Boundaries, this is planetary intelligence. This is knowledge that we need to harness. So large language models, as they grow, they're including all of the internet. And we know that that does not include only climate truths. In fact, it's largely not climate truths. So this is specifically the mission we've set for ourselves, is to respect the direction of AI laws that are going, that it should be open, transparent, trustworthy, that you should be able to go back and understand where did the output come from. So we've been collecting this very knowledge base that keeps coming, and it goes as far as podcast transcripts from these thought leaders. So there's so much knowledge out there, but there's no one group that can say this is the intelligence of the planet. So this needs to be open for the peer review, for the feedback loops, so that we can decide together, yes, that's climate truths. Yes, we see why that worked and why that didn't work, because the lessons in what didn't work are equally as valuable, because that means that the next deployment does not have to waste those resources and that time.
Yeah.
So this is, our mission is to indeed develop a responsible and ethical, and in French they call it sober AI. So this is an open data set that you are all welcome to look at. And I hope that this presentation will invite the entire broader community to begin contributing to this knowledge base, because this is meant to be shared knowledge to be used.
Jenny, I'm going to have to rush you now a little bit. Can you share your screen so that the audience can actually see what it's? We've got about 5 or 6 minutes, really, so I'm going to have to push you through this presentation.
I'll do my best to go quick. So indeed, planetary intelligence, we have based the recommendations, frameworks, the vectors, the prioritization on planetary boundaries, and indeed the Earth for All framework. And we were so grateful when you released the data set, because that's exactly what we need, is to harness the pathways that have been identified and agreed upon. So it's a platform to recommend solutions, and you have multiple ways to use it. You can either select, we've got a pre-prepared demo here. You can select your location and search for human and planetary challenges, problems, high waste, lack of education, soil degradation, poverty. and it will recommend key interventions. That does not mean technologies, that does not mean companies, that also is actions, citizen-driven waste collection, plastic waste repurposing. And it will give you a predicted, cost and timescale of deployment. And then it will recommend different tools that can help you understand your progress. And the second path using the solution recommender is we're using an AI methodology called decision intelligence. And decision intelligence creates an actions to outcomes framework of a decision, which is a way to limit the emissions and the processing of AI. So this is more minds than it is machines.
No clock on my
So this
iPad.
is the limited language model that we're developing. And you choose your context, you choose your use case. And for the purpose of this demo, we have
So I was
just
completely
4
lost.
use cases, and we'll choose cities for this purpose. And PyBot asks you, what are your objectives? I would like to, increase renewable energy use. I would like to increase composting. I'd like to reduce energy demand. So let's reduce water waste, for example. And Pi will have a think about this, take a minute or two, or hopefully less. Those in the technology industry know that a public demo is always a challenge. And so it's referencing our knowledge base, which is the solutions as described, which are the key metrics that we need to address, prioritized by sector, prioritized by challenge. And decision intelligence breaks recommendations into 4 parts: my objectives, my intermediates, and my intermediates are what would I measure to determine my progress or lack thereof? And that's where you attach data. And the actions, what are the solutions that I need to deploy to achieve my objectives? And so you'll see, some of these will provide you additional information on how to use green roofs, rainwater harvesting. And I can either decide to continue with this decision and begin to monitor my progress, or I can regenerate it. And now I'm going to the dashboard, which is what businesses, and of course, in fact, cities as well, can use to understand their progress on key objectives. And as you can see, the key metrics are the same across UN SDGs, across ESG reporting frameworks, across CDP reporting. They are, people and planetary health signals. And so this is where you are able to understand, progress that I'm making in a very specific objective that I have set for myself. I'll stop if there's any questions.
No.
No, we're
We
okay.
Will you?
And we've
Let's
Sorry.
move on. We've got about 3 or 4 more minutes actually, Jenny, just to get through this because we have a next show coming up. Sorry, but you press on. We've got 3 or 4 minutes. I think we can just take.
Yeah, I think the key to all of this is we have all the solutions. They keep coming. If you start looking, they just keep coming. The Earthshot comes out with 15 amazing, brilliant, innovative finalists every year. And the point is to help scale them. And the Solar Impulse, which we are incredibly impressed with. And we would welcome the industry at large to consider finding a central source, a central home to validate solutions, to share them broadly, because that means we understand what works where, who has tried this, what is the projected impact. There are so many databases of solutions. The Go Explorer, which has 15,000 solutions. There are just solutions everywhere. All we need to do is start recommending where they need to go.
Yeah.
Because that's not broad knowledge.
Yeah.
There is limited understanding. People think, oh, we must fly less. No, if you are an agricultural player, don't worry about how many flights you take. Don't worry about how many people are working from home. You have key metrics to focus on: care for land, care for people. And it's the guidance against the key metrics to attempt to provide signals through the noise.
Yeah, I like that concept actually, Jenny, because you might get a large private oil company saying that we've electrified all our gasoline pumping stations and every employee has the right to an electric car, but that's not really dealing with the problem of a large oil company. Their emissions are connected with the product they make rather than some of these other measures they might claim are really beneficial. You're talking about focus on the core business and how to reduce the emissions out of that rather than the flim flam that goes around the edges.
Well, the planetary Hippocratic oath, do no more harm to people and planet.
Mm,
So if you are, whatever sector you're in, you know what your key areas of impact are.
yeah,
That's where the focus needs to be. I
yeah,
think ESG reporting is great, but emissions as a proxy for progress in measurement, it's not enough. Health of soil, people, wellness, drinkability of water, you know, breathability of air.
yeah,
These aren't emissions accountable.
yeah,
We need to be focused on the key metrics by sector, by area, and perhaps we've actually been going about it wrong. Maybe we're not doing very well talking about the problems. Maybe it's time to shift focus and start promoting and talking about what are the key solutions
yeah,
and what will the impact be and what will be the improvement, as Sandrine said, what is it in it for me?
yeah,
How
yeah.
will my life be better when these solutions are deployed?
So, Jenny, we have to wrap it up there. We knew this was going to be a glimpse into this this new development that you and your team are working on. I know Owen's there and Sandrine probably had to go, but Owen, in one final thing, potential.
Oh, huge potential. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of sort of place-based solutions. And the demo was brilliant at really capturing that. I guess the next stages are, languages. How do you make sure that sort of all languages are encompassed so anybody in the world can get hold of it?
Yeah,
Regulations, how do people just be able to get through the red tape to actually implement the solutions?
yeah,
And financing, how much is it going to cost, and what are the
yeah.
financing options to finance it? So those three things. I mean, this is a brilliant foundation to start moving into that space.
Yeah, we have to wrap it up here. Jenny, we really liked it. Owen, thanks for being on the show. Sandrine, too. We've got to move to our next program, our next slot with other guests. And I think this is not the end of hearing from Planetary Intelligence. I think we can have another look at this in New York and in Baku. Thank you very much indeed. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.